In the Huddle was created to give student athletes, parents and coaches an inside look at the journey through US college sport and all that comes with it. The demands, the experiences, the excitement and the opportunities available to our student athletes from around the world. Study and Play USA facilitates a comprehensive, customised approach for student athletes and families for their whole journey, from their high school preparation years right through to US college graduation. Well, folks, this is going to be a very special edition of In the Huddle with Study and Play USA. Today's guest has never taken the US college pathway, so we won't be talking about scholarships, life on campus, and all things college like we do in other episodes. But what today's guest has done in his young life to date will inspire you, will hopefully help you unlock your own passion and give you the confidence to go out and pursue your dreams. So joining us is an Australian icon who in his early 20s, after becoming a solicitor, faced a fork in the road of his career to continue with his law career or turn his attention to inspiring others as a poet. Well, in the decades that have followed, it seems that today's special guest, Rupert McCall, took the right turn all those years ago. Over the last 25 years, among plenty of other honours, Rupert McCall has written poems and delivered them in the presence of the Queen, and not just royalty, sporting royalty too, reciting a poem dedicated to arguably the two greatest ever male tennis players, Rod Laver and Roger Federer, reducing the latter to tears. And it's not just sport that has inspired Rupert's poetry. He's also famously delivered one of his stirring poems on Anzac Day dawn service in Gallipoli to mark the 90th anniversary of the famous landing at Anzac Cove. In more recent years, his works were recognised the world over, so much so that he was asked to recite a touching piece at Ground Zero in New York to mark the 10th anniversary of September 11 and pay tribute to the thousands of firefighters who so bravely sacrificed so much. Rupert, thanks for coming in, mate.
Batesy,
yeah,
I'm honoured to be here.
Yeah, no, really pleased to have you. 2020, bit of a rough year, but different. I suppose for yourself, mate, was it one of those years where, okay, all right, I can't have those public engagements like I normally do. That's probably back down a little bit, but it was a chance to write more?
Well, yes. To go back to the first part of the question, it has been an interesting year, for want of a better adjective. And we've almost become accustomed to the world of COVID now, but rewind the tape. Back then, you're sitting there 1 week getting yourself prepared to MC a conference, and I got a phone call from the organisers. It was the Liquor Legends Conference, which is a pretty good one to be involved with.
I imagine.
And the guy says, "Yeah, Rupe, we're going ahead with it. So all systems go." I remember I was sitting in this cafe. 5 minutes later, he rings back and says, "Mate, it's off. It's cancelled." Yeah. So that was the first domino that fell. Then it was like just getting sucked into the black hole. As a person, a poet, if you like, an entertainer who relies on a live audience, well, all of a sudden we were living in a world that could not have a live audience, and it didn't look like changing in the foreseeable future. So, mate, it has been a tough and challenging chapter in the life of the poet. But what do we do in this country? Well, no complaints, or no major complaints. You roll the sleeves up, you stay positive, get on the front foot and come up with plan B. Yep. And if plan B doesn't work, plan C. And it did involve a lot more writing and time to be creative and to take that opportunity to just change the angle a little bit.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think one of the things about you that strikes me is you're a pretty positive bloke, and I think you're right. And as you say, the Aussie fighting spirit, isn't it? I think that's sort of, what do you do? Let's just get on with life. But I loved your poem you wrote at the start of the pandemic, finishing with the lines, our hearts will be together and I think we'll be all right. I think that sums up the Aussie spirit.
Well, it was written in the middle of a dark night. I actually got on a plane to Townsville to watch the the first Broncos game, back when they were winning.
It's a long time ago.
It seems like a different phase of world history, but so I spoke to the team before they played and beat the Cowboys.
Is that last win too for a while? No,
well,
they did win another one.
Yeah,
that's
they
right.
won the first two. Obviously, lockdown or COVID wasn't great for them, but that's another story. I flew back and I was coaching a rugby team, visited my dad, who's a little bit crook, went to the Caxton on the Sunday afternoon and was hugging mates. And then I get a call from Queensland Health advising that I was sitting next to a positive COVID case on the plane, on the flight to Townsville.
Oh, wow.
So panic. It was at the time when this thing was so uncertain. I pretty much had a semi-meltdown thinking about the people I'd been in contact with. What if? Started to almost feel the symptoms, probably from the mental anxiety.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was finding it hard to sleep. I woke up in the middle of that dark night, lockdown in quarantine, and I wrote my ode to COVID, which basically drew on all of our history, what we've been through. Adversity is endless as the beaches on our shores, fires, flood, depression, drought, the toll of countless wars, homes in ashes, market crashes. All these things we've met and all these things have scarred us, but we've not been beaten yet. So when I said I think we'll be all right, at the end of that poem, was probably I knew we'd be all right.
Yeah,
we just had to stay positive.
It was exactly right, and that's sounds like it was a few anxious moments in it. I do remember back at the start, COVID. What is it? We don't know how bad it is, and all we know is you don't want to get it. And then if there's a chance that not only have you got it, but you might have infected others, and that's a pretty scary moment, I'd imagine.
Absolutely, and there's still some darkness to get through till we reach the other side. But again, as I said in the poem, like I guarantee we'll get there, and our spirit won't have died, because it never has. I mean, it's what makes us who we are, in giving us, I guess, that unique flavour as a race of people here in Australia.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, but yeah, I'm a silver linings kind of bloke as well. Like you say, your silver lining this year has been, I guess, hope. And also the ability to get creative and write more and really get that sort of stuff happening for yourself. But I think for me, my reflection this year, silver lining would be, you're spending a lot more time with your loved ones that you probably normally do. So for me, being a little bit more grateful for what you do have rather than what, gee, I can't go do this, I can't do that. Gee, but I can go for a bike ride, which we haven't done for 3 years.
It was the simplicity that was beautiful.
Back to basics.
Right, because you had no option. And it kind of proved to us that really that's where the heart beats. It's with the people that mean the most to you, and that's family and good friends. And we also, and as a result of lockdown and the adversity and backs against the wall, we also won a State of Origin series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another silver lining.
Exactly. They're everywhere if you look for them. If you look for them, they're everywhere. I agree. So no, that's a ripper. But mate, look, if I'm talking about being grateful, I want to thank you for something that happened actually 23 years ago. You won't remember this, or you may not remember this, but
23 years ago, wow.
Yeah. I did the math and realised it was 23 years ago, about 97. I met you at a rugby game. I think I was there for only a few years out of school for me at that time, but I was at a reunion. So, and you were at the game as well with some of your mates. And I think I just got chatting and told you I was about to go to America on a US college journey. And I think you probably sensed that I was a bit nervous and probably homesick before I even got there. Yeah. And shortly after I arrived all the way over in freezing cold Oklahoma, this book arrived. So the old Slops, Props and Goose Step Flavoured Lifesavers by Jason Rupert McCall. and with the personalised message. Hope this keeps the coals fired in Oklahoma. Have a good one, mate. So, but mate, that was actually really well received, and obviously you've probably done a few of those signed books over the years, but that one left a mark for me because I was homesick and I was a very passionate Aussie, and I felt okay. That's kept me connected to home, which I think is important when you're traveling, isn't it, for a young bloke? You know?
It is, yeah. Yeah. And I was a young bloke on the cover of that book.
Yeah,
I used to know that kid.
Not bad.
Right.
At least you've kept the majority of your hair, unlike other people in this chat, mate. So you've done well.
Well, we won't go take the top angle, but they were the glory days, I suppose. Although, for you that was a challenging time. I finished. I'm a Redcliffe boy. Always will be. So I grew up on a diet of Redcliffe Dolphins in the footy season and the Australian cricket team in the summer, and Sheffield Shield tragedies until ultimately, a couple of years before that, before we met, we won the thing. But rugby became my game, and you get to the crossroads where you have to choose cricket or rugby, and the thought of standing out in the sun all weekend probably came second to playing 80 minutes of rugby, having a few beers and looking out for girls, etc. at that age. So I decided that my best option, the way that I planned on fulfilling my potential and playing for the Wallabies, which is what I wanted to do, was to get across the Hornibrook Bridge and go to Brothers. So I arrived there in 1988, my first year out of school. I walked down that sacred gravel driveway of dreams, put my name in Merv Hazel's book alongside John Eales, who became our captain in Colts. Yep. We won a Colts 1 grand final in 1989. And then I played quite a few games for Brothers, but that's another story. The point that I'm trying to make is that's where I met the Nudgy Boys.
Yeah, right.
Because that was their path as well, to go and play at Brothers.
And they led you to Australia, I hope.
Obviously.
Yeah, right.
This bright-eyed, innocent kid from the cliff. Anybody who grew up at Redcliffe knows that's a lie. It didn't take much leading Australia from the Nudgy guys, and they remain some of my best friends. But to go to I guess it would have been Nudgy Terrace match for an old boys kind of reunion atmosphere. That's where we first crossed paths.
That's exactly right. And I think inspired by your work in that book, obviously I read every part of that book, and then I subsequently bought all your other books. So I think the next one I got was the Green and Gold Malaria, which just touches on obviously that poem itself is an absolute cracker, one of my favourites, but also it just touches on that whole idea of travel in that whole book, and one of the poems that sort of resonates with me is the Lucky Land. But your trip overseas that you brought to life in that book sound like a heck of a trip. That was a trip of a lifetime, that one.
Yeah, your foray to the other side of the world was a little bit different to mine. I know that you were going there basically to fight for your life in a sporting sense, to stay relevant and to I guess answer the questions that you're asking yourself. Am I good enough to mix it with the best? And I'm sure that you were. And you learned a lot in that process. My trip was a little bit different back then. I mean, I've since been to America to ply my trade. And so I understand the magnitude of those kind of occasions, like when you're on stage or you're on court, and that you've got to deliver your best.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
absolutely.
you're going to sink.
Yes. Yep.
You got no option. You got to swim. And as they say, New York was where I first landed. And we might talk about that later with the New York Fire Department.
We sure will.
If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, as another poet once said. And so that was what I was thinking. But to come back, not ramble too much. My trip that led to the book Green and Gold Malaria and the final poem in that anthology, The Lucky Land, was an escape basically for me and my younger brother.
Yep.
And my middle brother was working in London, so we had a place of refuge. It was right. We shaved our heads, and I packed my flag, I packed my bag, and an old guitar as well.
Yes.
And my bro and I hit the UK, London, Ireland, Scotland.
Dublin turned to Publin.
Dublin turned to Publin after Ireland beat Wales at Lansdowne Road. The memories are epic.
Yep.
The Grand National, visiting the birthplace of the Beatles and where they came through the ranks. London was many pints, and the pubs. There's just the scene of totally kind of changed things up from what we were used to, and so it was inspiring, and travel is inspiring for me. I think that's where you see life from a different angle, and you feel kind of compelled, I do anyway, to pay tribute. So all of those memories, those chapters of that trip, I think it was about 6 weeks, flowed into The Lucky Land. But the final line, or the final stanza, is what's most important.
It is, and I'll read it for the listeners because, or I'll recite it. I don't need to read it because I know it so well. It's something that's really resonated for me because I remember reading Green and Gold Malaria on the flight back, my very first flight back to Brisbane from Oklahoma, and then literally was reading that as I was on the descent into Brisbane. The great romance of travel took a young bloke by the hand to the place that he was missing, to his home, the Lucky Land. It's just like, and that makes a lot of sense because you go away and you've got all these dreams and it's amazing and you've got to explore, as you say, pay tribute to where you're going and where you're at. But at the end of the day, that gives you this new appreciation of where home is.
Correct.
So, and you got to go there to find home and find where you belong and all that sort of stuff. Right. So that was a big one. That was very. And even the word romance, because there's a romance to travel. Everyone wants to do it. They're curious. And I think there's a lot of people in Australia, because we are an island nation. We want to get out and see the world, which I think is a great trait. So there's a romance to that. Oh, gee, maybe this is nicer than here.
It's got to be something better.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, there are amazing things, but there's nothing like home.
There's no substitute.
Yeah.
And you want to escape, is the word I mentioned before, the boredom, the routine, the humdrum life of, I guess, the way that things evolve when you've come out of school and you've got a degree and you've got a job and you're playing a bit of sport. So that becomes really quite a routine. And then there's this, the bright light, the spark that puts you on that plane to find yourself and to discover what life is really all about. But you have to go a long way sometimes to appreciate how good you've got it in your own backyard. And that's the realization, that's the moment when the clarity of the whole exercise dawns on you, when you're sitting in that plane on the way home, and as the sun's coming up over Moreton Bay, it flies across the Redcliffe Peninsula, and you look out the window and you get a shiver down the spine because you know that that's where you belong. It's pretty powerful.
It is. I can honestly tell you, I've come and gone from America a lot of times. I get a shiver every time. It's amazing, isn't it? So it's a physical reaction to home. So no, that poem and that finishing stanza, as you said, is that's the one that resonates most with me. But I think obviously for our listeners, we've got a lot of youngsters listening, teenagers that are thinking about
and
traveling and watching. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And they're thinking about, okay, I've got to go and do this American pathway. Never travelled before. What do you say to you sort of already said it, but what do you say to a youngster who's thinking about doing this?
Well, it's a great thing to do. Embrace it, like soak it up, soak up every last second of that adventure. But understand that there's some awesome corners of the world, and you've visited a few, and so have I. I've still got many more that I want to get to, hopefully, like when the world comes back to shape. But don't take for granted how good we've got it here.
Yeah.
And I think COVID's probably shone a light on that fact.
Yeah.
This is a pretty cool place to be. When you pick up the paper, if you still do that, or you get on the online world news and read what's going on in some corners of the world, I wouldn't swap Queensland for too many others at this point in time. So it's a balance. I mean, don't be frightened. Get out there when you can now, and really take hold of that opportunity. But just keep things in balance.
Great advice. Hope you're listening to that one.
And you learn so much right from that experience that serves you well in your life ahead, and you know that more than anyone.
That's right. Regardless of how successful the trip is, because it's you grow up the minute you jump on the plane in some way. I always say that when you leave school, that day, that final bell goes, you actually you grow up immeasurably. And then when you do things like this, it's the same thing. But it's about backing yourself, and I think I want to talk about decision making, because I think there's an art to that as well. And I think there's no class you can take in school about decision making or things like that.
Maybe
so I
they
think,
should make it one.
You're
right.
And we're all faced with hundreds of decisions every day. A lot of them are we're not even aware of. But kids in particular, making a decision to go to college in America is a big one. We understand that, but it's about backing yourself. But I just want to touch on your story that I talked about in the introduction. You had to make a pretty big career call. Came to a virtual crossroads, and then which required a big decision.
Yeah.
Okay, you finish your law degree. Do I use that and continue that career which I worked hard for at uni? Mum and dad put me through uni, or a very left field idea, I'm sure at the time, I want to be a poet and an entertainer.
Sounds crazy.
Do you remember that
way?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? It's such a contrast. But
yeah.
Did you remember the moment when you made the decision?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a crossroads moment.
And
I think we all have our crossroads moment. If it hasn't already happened, maybe we have a series of them.
Yeah.
In our journey. But I was a law student. I studied law after getting a TE score at De La Salle College, which
showing your age now,
allowed me that opportunity. Right, that ancient thing called a TE score.
Yeah.
And I studied at the best of my ability. Probably there's a few distractions creeping in. Mentioned them before as I was playing rugby at Brothers and having a few orange cordials in the mix. But it was, I kind of knew that it probably wasn't right up my alley, this pathway in the law. Having said that, I got my degree. I got a job as an article clerk at a big firm in the city, Charlotte Street. I did my articles there, so 2 years of an apprenticeship basically, and then I got sent or sentenced to our suburban office in Strathpine.
Yep.
So I was a solicitor by now, and I was doing litigation at Strathpine. Now the office is there because it was a developing neighbourhood, and the conveyancing aspect of the firm was quite significant. It's where they were making their money. But there was another solicitor looking after conveyancing. I had the rest. So I called it miscellaneous law, and that was whatever walked through the door. Now, for a young man, it can be quite daunting, like a solicitor who's just earned his stripes, so to speak. There was lots of family law, domestic violence, restraining orders, custody, disputes of different kinds, personal injuries, all of that kind of stuff. It was
the whole kit and caboodle.
Right, yeah. It was a smorgasbord of strife.
That's a good way of putting it.
Right, that I felt that it was my responsibility to try and untangle. And you have this idea of justice, when you study law, and then you realise that in the reality of life, it doesn't always happen. And I don't want to put the law down too much because it's a worthy pursuit. And there are people out there more suited to being a family lawyer than I was. I couldn't cut it off and leave it behind. I would go home and think about the victims in a lot of those situations were kids, and just caught in the middle, of this bitterness. And it had me rattled. So, amongst other things, I realised that maybe there was something else. I sat down with my big Rooster Paradise pack one day, and I just had this light bulb moment. I realised that there wasn't a lot of love and inspiration in the family law division of the Petrie Magistrates Court.
Right.
So I retired. I turned left and took the road less travelled without even thinking about it. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a family. I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I started writing my poetry. The book before that, one that you held up before, Rhymes, Idles and Shenanigans, I had scrounged the funds to put it together, and it was a real backyard job. But I launched that in December of 93 at the Gateway Hotel in North Quay.
Yep.
I was admitted as a solicitor in January of 94, about the time I got sent to Strathpine. 6 months later, on a cold winter's morning, I came home from work and I said to my mum and dad, I'm out.
You're out.
I don't like this. I don't think it's for me. I'm going to make my living as a poet.
How was the reaction?
Not good.
Not good.
No.
Yeah.
No, there was almost silence. That stunned silence. Maybe they questioned my sanity, like at the time, thinking, really, like 12 years of school, 4 years of law, 2 years as an article clerk, 6 months as a solicitor, and
20 years of work gone into that moment.
But I didn't think twice about it. I don't think I did. Maybe I gave it, I would have given it some thought, but when I look back, it seems a harder decision than it felt at the time.
Yes. Yep.
And what I say to the young people out there, if you like the law, go for it. Study hard and get that degree and finish the job before you have to start making those decisions, would be my advice.
Yes.
Don't just bail out halfway through.
See it through.
But ultimately, you've got two voices to listen to. And one is the voice of safety, the voice that says that everybody says you should go down this path. Society expects that you should go down this path because that's the normal thing to do. But there's another voice that asks you to trust your instincts and to follow the path of your greatest passion. And if that means taking the road less travelled, well, take it.
Saddle up.
Listen to that voice.
Yeah, that's great advice. Very, very good advice. I was going to ask you, was that decision on a whim? Was it pros and cons list?
I had the book out. I'd already started speaking at a couple of events.
Yep.
I was just a skinny, nervous kid standing up there on that stage. But the adrenaline was significant.
Yeah, and the reaction must have been pretty good to keep
was
you going.
Positive.
Yeah, that helps, doesn't it? Yeah, it makes you believe that what you're doing is the right thing. And was there a moment once you made that decision, you got through that difficult conversation with mum and dad, that you did ever go back and regret it, or not regret it, doubt it?
More so in recent years.
Yeah.
Strangely enough. Mum and dad backed me, by the way. I'm sure they thought that it was going to be fleeting, and then I'd be back in the law office pretty soon. But they gave me the wind to put in my sail. And that's why my latest book is dedicated to them. My mum in particular, has just been probably, one of my greatest heroes. Don't get emotional. But yeah, I retired halfway through 1994, and I wrote Green and Gold Malaria for Australia Day in 1995.
So you got to work pretty quickly.
Well, that sealed the deal. A lot of the stuff in Slops Props is Queensland flavoured.
Yes.
But then I wrote my tribute to what it feels like as a proud Australian. To me, my version of that pride, Green and Gold Malaria. And I'm not going to say it took the country by storm, but it assumed more of a national presence, my poetry then. John Laws recited it. Alan Jones had me on his show. I did it for Kerry Ann Kennelly on the midday show. Things got bigger.
I remember the Kerry Ann moment.
Right.
I saw that.
Yep. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's a bit surreal now to look back. But so I was off and running. So I didn't have any second thoughts about what I was doing. Everything was like just going bang, bang, bang. We won the Sheffield Shield about 95. So it was all happening. I was on the hill.
All the stars were aligning. Yeah, I remember you on the hill
singing and leading the chorus.
Yes. Yeah.
As we finally put that demon to rest.
A few shenanigans up on the hill that day. I remember watching that. I was there. I shouldn't have been there. I was supposed to be somewhere else. But
where were you supposed to be?
School, I believe. Don't listen to that, kids. But, it was a very special moment.
Or your mum and dad, who probably didn't know.
Yeah, no, they've since known.
Know about it now.
They do now, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, you became part of that Queensland sporting history. In more recent times, with children, family to feed, school fees to pay, and having ridden the roller coaster, there are some dark moments. Let's not beat around the bush. I mean, we have to be honest. There have been times when I wondered what my life would be like if I was now, had stayed on that legal path and was now the partner of a law firm, like some of my mates are. But it's only fleeting. I wouldn't want to be that miserable.
That's, as you say, it's interesting with decision making, because when you make a decision, you're ruling, you're always turning something down to pursue something else, and they call it opportunity cost, I guess, in an economic sense. But I think with the way I look at decision making, if I'm to give it some advice to the kids as well, and I really hope you're listening to Rupert here intently, because he's got a very powerful message. But I think making decisions, everyone's going to go about it different ways. Yours was almost just happened. It wasn't like a big pros and cons list. It was sort of coming for a while, and you just made the decision and then you made it work. Like, that's my biggest thing, is whatever decision you do make, however you come to that decision, don't look back. and know that whatever you have done is going to some way and contribute to who you are now. So what any decision you made is all part of your story, I suppose.
Yeah, isn't that right? Try not to have too many regrets. I mean, I had people come up to me when I first made the decision and I was rolling with great momentum, older people that said, oh, I was pretty good at this, or I was pretty good at that, but just didn't really have the opportunity. Well, the line that's in the introduction to the book that you've got on the table there was one of those little, I was still in the law office, and I think they still have them, those daily calendars where you turn over the page and there's a little quote at the bottom of every day.
Yes.
Well, maybe this was the moment that we were alluding to before. Flick over the page when I was pretty close to the crossroads, and the quote was, "The sure way to miss success is to miss the opportunity." Kind of sounds like a cliche now, but at that moment in my being, it was exactly what I needed to hear, because it's pretty true.
Yeah, that's almost like, that'll do me. Decision made. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, it is a pretty defining moment. I've got a few little topics I wanted to talk about today. That was a big one for me, like life decisions. I think it's a really important thing for kids to watch and listen to. The beauty of travel and what you can learn from that. Another one's passion. I think passion's it's a word that can be bandied around a little bit. But if you look at your poems, it's some common themes. You've got an unwavering patriotism, which is very obvious towards your family, country, and also an unparalleled sort of passion for sport. That can't be denied. When people resonate with this passion, obviously, it's infectious, brings happy memories for people. I read a quote from you that speaks to this, that your intention is to deliver a message that inspires and leaves people feeling good about themselves. Is that your intention with all of your poems?
Well, it's almost an unintentional result of what I do. I mean, I don't think about it too much, but just by being myself, I think being the best part of myself, it tends to have that effect. So, when you stand up on that stage and you get the opportunity to look people in the eye and have something to deliver that connects with their heart and soul, and then you feel like the lift. It doesn't always happen, by the way, but when it does, it's really rewarding. And it's almost addictive.
Yeah, I would imagine. A bit like being a cricketer playing the MCG Boxing Day Test. I'd imagine that'd be pretty addictive, right? Well, you're sort of feeling you're getting a reaction from people who just really appreciate your work.
Yeah, and then the best thing or the most important thing is to not take it for granted. To understand that this really is your best contribution to the world. So don't take it for granted. Do it well.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, I think, which is probably a good thing for our listeners and viewers to take in, is of how contagious the positive stuff is. And when you surround yourself with people who are passionate for the right reasons and who are generally positive, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's not all a bed of roses and rainbows.
Yes, correct.
We ride the roller coaster. Everybody does.
Yep.
But the more you associate with the good things in life, the more that flows into the path that lies ahead. These things are contagious. The good stuff is, and so is the bad stuff.
Yep.
You've got to try and negotiate those hard days and not slide too far down the hole. Think of the things that really make you who you are, the things that you stand for, what makes you feel alive. Connect with that and other people, in that group around you who make you feel pretty good about yourself. It doesn't always just happen as a matter of fact, but it is pretty important.
Yeah, and I think you just touched on almost like a definition of passion. I think how to find passion. You see these self-help books and motivational speakers saying you got to find your passion, and they're right. I think that's important. So if you find your passion, you never work a day in your life, they say. But you can't just contrive passion. You can't just find it. I think it's all about being around people who are passionate, who have found their passion, being around people who inspire you. That might trigger something to help you find your passion. I think that's my take on passion.
Ask yourself the question, what is going to be my best contribution to the wider world? It starts at home, then it extends to your neighborhood and your community. There's a pride involved there that then, for me, evolves into something that becomes inspiring as a matter of state in Queensland, more importantly as a matter of country, and the pride I feel living here. But then ultimately, as a citizen of the world, what difference can I make? How can I make it? And who's going to help me? Like, be in the right frame of mind to get on the front foot and have a crack.
Love it. That's great.